Elias Varin leaned against the rusted hull of his ship, the worn star, watching as the crowded marketplace of Drakenarfor bustled with activity. The air was thick with the scent of burning fuel, alien spices, and something he didn't want to identify. Traders shouted out their deals, promising the best weapons, fastest ships, and rarest artifacts. But Elias wasn't here for trinkets. He needed a way off this rock. His ship was falling apart. The engines barely worked, the life support system was on its last breath, and the navigation controls had a mind of their own. Fixing it would cost more than he had. Selling it would barely get him a week's worth of food. He had no good options, until now. He glanced at the alien merchant standing before him. The creature, a Bakari with a long reptilian face and glowing yellow eyes, grinned at him. Its sharp teeth flashed under the flickering neon lights of the market. "You are lucky, human," the Bakari hissed. "I offer you something better than a ship." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Better than a ship? Unless it's a miracle." "I doubt that." The Bakari chuckled and stepped aside. Behind him, a figure stood motionless inside a glass containment pod. At first glance, Elias thought it was some kind of statue, perfectly still, tall and carved like a warrior out of metal. But then he noticed the slow rise and fall of her chest. She was alive. Elias took a step closer. She was unlike anything he had seen before. Silver skin that shimmered under the lights, eyes closed, as if in deep sleep. Her muscular frame hinted at strength beyond human limits, and faint scars ran across her arms, marks of countless battles. The Bakari's grin widened. "She is Akri, a warrior breed. Faster, stronger, deadlier than any living being. And she is yours, if you trade your ship." Elias frowned. The Akri were a rare and powerful species, known for their unmatched combat skills. Buying one as a bodyguard would cost a fortune. Something wasn't right. "And she just follows me?" Elias asked, crossing his arms. "Why would you give her away for an old, broken ship?" The Bakari let out a dry laugh. "She is bound. A contract seals her fate. Whoever owns her controls her. She will protect you, fight for you, even die for you." Elias studied the warrior again. Her face was unreadable, locked in sleep, but something about her felt off. Could she really be controlled? Was she truly just a tool? But he had no better choice. His ship was useless. If this Akri was as deadly as they said, she could help him survive, maybe even earn him enough credits to buy another ship. Elias sighed. "Fine, we have a deal." The Bakari's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. With a press of a button, the containment pod released a hiss of air, and the glass slid open. The Akri's eyes snapped open. Elias had expected something inhuman. Glowing eyes, a robotic stare, maybe even hostility. But what he saw instead shook him to his core. Her eyes were deep, dark, and intelligent. Not the cold, obedient gaze of a machine, but the sharp, calculating look of someone studying everything around them. She stepped out of the pod smoothly, her movements too precise, too controlled. She looked at Elias, tilting her head slightly, then spoke in a voice clear and strong. "You are my master now," she asked. Elias hesitated. Something about the way she said it sent a chill down his spine, but he forced a grin and nodded. "I guess so." Her lips curled slightly, almost like a smirk. Then she knelt before him, placing one fist over her heart. "I am Zakera. I serve you until my contract is fulfilled." Elias exhaled, trying to push away the unease creeping into his mind. He had a warrior at his side now. That was all that mattered. The Bakari handed him a small device. "This controls her. Press it, and she obeys without question." Elias stared at the device in his hand, a single red button. He didn't like the idea of controlling someone like this, but if it worked, he wouldn't complain. The Bakari chuckled. "Enjoy your warrior, human, but be careful." "Careful of what?" Elias asked. The merchant's grin widened, far too amused. She is more than she seems. Elias ignored him. He turned to Zakara. Come on. Let's get out of here before I regret this deal. Zakara stood smoothly, following behind him without hesitation. Yet as she walked, her dark eyes flickered with something Elias didn't notice. Something not meant to be seen. A glint of amusement. A hint of a trap. She had been traded away, but this was only the beginning. And Elias, he had just walked into her game. Elias Varon sat in the pilot's seat of the stolen shuttle, gripping the controls as the ship rumbled through space. He had made plenty of bad deals before, but this one felt different. Behind him, Zakara sat silently, watching him with those unreadable dark eyes. She hadn't spoken much since they left Draknarfor, only responding when spoken to. That should have reassured Elias, but instead, it made him uneasy. He had expected an unstoppable warrior, a blunt weapon to use when needed. But she wasn't just a warrior. She was something else, something more dangerous. Elias cleared his throat. So, Zakara. Yes. Her voice was smooth, controlled, too controlled. How does this contract thing work? He tapped the control device the Balkari had given him. It was small, round, and had a single red button. Supposedly, pressing it would force Zakara to obey his commands without question. Zakara glanced at the device, and then back at him. It binds me to your service. Until the contract is complete, I follow your orders. Elias frowned. That simple. A slight pause. Yes. He didn't believe her. But he wasn't stupid enough to press the button just to test it. Instead, he focused on the ship's display. Their destination was a refueling station near the asteroid belt of Lothar 5. It was a quiet place, mostly used by smugglers and rogue traders. Once they landed, Elias planned to sell some stolen cargo, earn some credits, and maybe, just maybe, figure out what to do next. But fate had other plans. Suddenly, the cockpit flickered with red warning lights. Elias cursed. What now? Zakara didn't move. She simply watched. The ship's engine sputtered, and the control panel flashed an error message. System failure. Manual override engaged. Elias's heart pounded. Manual override. I didn't touch anything. Zakara tilted her head slightly. Strange. Elias shot her a sharp look. Strange? You're way too calm for someone about to crash. The ship jerked violently, and alarms blared as they veered off course. The navigation screen glitched, then displayed a new destination, a barren moon near the asteroid belt. Elias's stomach twisted. Someone had hacked the ship. Or worse, someone inside the ship had done it. His gaze snapped to Zakara. What did you do? Zakara remained still. I have done nothing. Elias didn't believe that for a second, but there was no time to argue. The ship was going down. With a curse, he grabbed the controls and fought against the override, trying to steady their descent. The barren moon loomed closer, its rocky surface stretching beneath them. We're gonna hit hard, Elias shouted. Zakara didn't flinch. The ship slammed into the ground, skidding across the rocky terrain before coming to a screeching halt. Smoke filled the cockpit, and sparks flew from the control panel. Elias groaned, rubbing his forehead. He was alive, but barely. He turned to Zakara. She had already unstrapped herself, standing as if nothing had happened. Elias exhaled. All right. That was. Before he could finish, the ship's doors locked automatically. A mechanical voice echoed through the cabin. Containment engage. Awaiting retrieval. Elias froze. Containment. Zakara stepped toward the door, placing a hand against it. She wasn't surprised. That's when Elias realized the truth. This wasn't an accident. This was a setup. His eyes widened as he turned to her. You knew. Zakara didn't deny it. She simply smiled. Elias's stomach twisted. He had been played. A shadow passed over the ship, and outside, he saw the unmistakable shape of a warship descending toward them. A warship with the Akri insignia. Zakara stepped toward him, her dark eyes filled with something dangerous. "You should not be afraid, Elias Farron," she said softly. Elias backed away, gripping the control device in his hand. His thumb hovered over the red button. Zakara laughed. A deep, knowing laugh. "You still think that will work?" she asked, her voice almost amused. Elias's blood ran cold. The Bakari had lied. The device was useless. Zakara took another step forward. Outside, the Akri soldiers began to land, surrounding the ship. "You were never the master," Zakara murmured. Her smirk widened. "You were always the prize." Elias Farron's mind raced as the ship's alarms blared in his ears. He had been tricked. Zakara wasn't just a warrior for hire. She was bait. And now, the hunters had arrived. Through the cracked viewport, Elias saw Akri soldiers descending from their warship, their silver armor reflecting the dim light of the barren moon. They moved in perfect formation, their weapons drawn and ready. Zakara stood calmly near the locked exit, watching them approach. She wasn't worried. Elias swallowed hard. He had to think fast. He gripped the useless control device, considering pressing the red button, but Zakara's smirk told him what he already knew. It was a lie. He had never been in control. Elias took a slow step back. "So, what now?" he asked, forcing a grin. "You hand me over, and they give you a medal." Zakara tilted her head. "Not a medal." She stepped toward him, her movements slow and deliberate. "They need you alive. If they wanted you dead, you would already be." Elias's stomach twisted. "Why?" Zakara didn't answer. Instead, the ship's external speakers crackled, and a deep, commanding voice filled the cabin. "Elias Farron, you will surrender. There is nowhere to run." Elias stiffened. The voice was cold, mechanical, unmistakably Akri. Zakara turned to the door, pressing her palm against the control panel. The locks hissed, and the doors slowly slid open. Elias tensed. This was it. A group of 6 Akri soldiers stood outside, their weapons trained on him. Their faces were hidden behind smooth, reflective helmets, but their posture made one thing clear: they were ready to kill him if necessary. Then, another figure stepped forward. He was taller than the others, wearing black armor lined with glowing red veins. His silver skin was scared, and his piercing yellow eyes locked onto Elias like a predator sizing up prey. Elias knew instantly who this was. Overlord Cyroth, one of the most feared Akri warlords in the galaxy. Elias had never met him before, but he had heard the stories of entire planets burned to dust under Cyroth's command. And now, Cyroth was here for him. The warlord's lips curled into a smirk. "It has been a long time, Architect." Elias's breath caught in his throat. "Architect." He frowned. "I think you've got the wrong guy." Cyroth chuckled. "Do not insult me with lies. We know who you are. We know what you have done." Elias's heart pounded. What was he talking about? Zakara turned slightly, watching his reaction. Her expression remained unreadable, but something about her posture had changed, as if she, too, was waiting to see what he would do next. Cyroth took another step forward. "You hid well, but not well enough. The time for running is over." Elias clenched his fists. He didn't remember hiding. He didn't remember being anyone important. All he knew was that he was a simple scavenger trying to survive, wasn't he? But if that was true, why did the Akri want him alive? Something was missing. Something buried deep inside his past. Cyroth gestured toward Zakara. "You have done well, warrior. Step aside." Zakara hesitated. It was only for a second, but Elias saw it. She turned her head slightly toward him, and in that brief moment, he saw something in her eyes. Doubt. Elias acted immediately. In one swift motion, he grabbed the emergency pressure valve on the side of the ship's door and yanked it hard. Boom! A burst of compressed air exploded outward, knocking the closest Akri soldiers off their feet. The force wasn't enough to kill them, but it gave Elias an opening. He ran. Zakera didn't stop him. Elias sprinted across the rocky surface, his boots kicking up dust as he zigzagged toward a jagged ridge in the distance. His mind screamed at him. He had no weapon, no plan, no backup. But he had one advantage: he was human. And humans didn't go down easy. Behind him, Chirath roared in frustration. After him, the Akri soldiers recovered quickly, raising their weapons and firing. Bright blue plasma shots cut through the air, searing into the ground around Elias. He threw himself forward, rolling behind a boulder just as a plasma blob struck the rock, sending shards flying. Breathing hard, Elias risked a glance back. Zakera hadn't moved. She was still standing in the open, watching the chase with an unreadable expression. Then, just before she turned away, Elias saw it again. That hesitation. She wasn't just following orders. She was thinking. But he didn't have time to wonder why. The Akri were closing in fast. And if he didn't find a way out of this mess soon, he wouldn't live long enough to find out the truth. Elias Varen's lungs burned as he sprinted across the rocky terrain, plasma shots sizzling through the air behind him. Each blast tore into the ground, sending up clouds of dust and debris. The Akri were fast, their movements precise and controlled. They didn't waste shots. They didn't hesitate. They were hunters, and Elias was their prey. He dove behind a jagged boulder, pressing his back against the cold stone. His mind raced. Why were they after him? What did Chirath mean when he called him the architect? None of it made sense. A familiar voice echoed in his mind. You were never the master. You were always the prize. Zakera. She had known. She had led him here, right into this trap. And yet, she hadn't stopped him from running. Why? Elias peeked out from behind the boulder. The Akri soldiers were advancing, moving in perfect formation. Too many to fight. He needed a way out. His eyes scanned the landscape. There, a narrow canyon cut through the moon's surface a few hundred meters away. If he could reach it, he might be able to lose them in the tunnels. But there was a problem. He wouldn't make it alone. The Akri were too fast, too well coordinated. He needed a distraction, something to slow them down. Elias's gaze flicked back toward the Akri warship, still hovering above the crash site. The ship's fuel cells were exposed. A direct hit could trigger a small explosion. Not enough to destroy the warship, but enough to buy him time. He took a deep breath, then moved. Dashing from cover, he grabbed a loose metal fragment from the wreckage and hurled it toward the ship's hull. It struck with a sharp clang, drawing the soldiers' attention. At the same moment, Elias sprinted toward the canyon. Shouts rang out. Plasma shots lit up the night, but Elias zigzagged, making himself a harder target. A shot grazed his shoulder, burning through the fabric of his jacket. He gritted his teeth but kept running. The canyon was close now. Just a few more steps. And then, out of nowhere, a figure landed in front of him. Elias barely had time to react before Zakera swung her leg in a wide, lightning-fast arc. He ducked, barely, feeling the wind of her kick just inches above his head. She wasn't holding back. Elias stumbled back, raising his hands. Wait. What are you? Zakera lunged again, her fist a blur. Elias barely dodged in time. She was toying with him, testing him. He gritted his teeth. If she wanted a fight, she'd get one. Zakera struck again, aiming for his ribs. Elias twisted, letting her punch glance off his side. Using the momentum, he grabbed her wrist and tried to throw her off balance. It was like trying to move a mountain. She barely budged. Zakera's dark eyes flickered with amusement. Not bad. Elias scowled. What the hell are you doing? Zakera didn't answer. Instead, she pressed forward, forcing him back. She wasn't using full force, but she was still too strong, too fast. Elias had seconds before the Akri soldiers arrived. He needed to end this now. He let her push him back, then dropped low, kicking her legs out from under her. For the first time, Zakara stumbled. Elias didn't hesitate. He turned and bolted into the canyon. Zakara recovered instantly, but she didn't chase him. Instead, she smiled and let him go. Varied secrets. Elias ran deeper into the canyon, his heart pounding. The walls grew narrower, the shadows swallowing him. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he had to keep moving. Minutes passed, then an hour. Silence. The Akri weren't following. Elias slowed, finally allowing himself to breathe. His shoulder ached from the plasma burn, and his body was sore from the fight. He sank against a rock, trying to make sense of everything. Zakara had fought him, but not to kill him. She had let him escape. And Cyroth, he had called him the architect. Elias ran a hand through his hair. What was he missing? A soft beep broke the silence. Elias tensed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, one he had stolen from the Bokhari merchant during their deal. The screen flickered to life. Lines of ancient code scrolled across it, symbols he didn't recognize. Then, a single message appeared. Project Architect Status. Active. Elias's blood ran cold. His past, the one he couldn't remember, wasn't just a mystery. It was a secret worth killing for. And he had just reactivated it. Somewhere in the shadows, a voice whispered through the device. Not in Akre, not in human language. But Elias understood. We have been waiting for you. Elias's fingers tightened around the device. He wasn't just running from the Akri anymore. He was running from himself. And whatever secret he had forgotten was waking up. Elias Varen sat in the shadows of the canyon, staring at the glowing message on the small device. Project Architect Status. Active. His fingers tightened around the device. His mind screamed at him. What did this mean? For as long as he could remember, he had been just a scavenger, a survivor, a nobody. But the Akri didn't think so. They were hunting him. Zakara had tricked him into coming here. And now something inside him had awakened. A faint static noise crackled from the device. Elias held his breath. Then, a voice, a deep metallic whisper, echoed from the screen. Elias Varen, you have been found. A chill ran down his spine. Who are you? He asked, his voice hoarse. The voice did not answer. Instead, the device flickered, showing strange symbols and coordinates. Elias recognized none of them, except for one number. Alpha 77. His heart pounded. That was his identification number from the Earth colonies. He had seen it on old work documents, military records, but he had never been in the military. Had he? He shut his eyes, trying to remember, but nothing came. It was like a locked door in his mind. A loud boom shook the ground. Elias snapped his head up. The Akri were coming. Distant plasma fire echoed through the canyon, growing louder. He had no more time to sit and think. He had to move. A desperate escape. Elias ran through the twisting canyon, his boots crunching against the rocky ground. The air was thin, cold, and dry, but he kept pushing forward. The Akri wouldn't stop hunting him. The question was, why? As he ran, the symbols on the device pulsed brighter, as if responding to his movement. Suddenly, a holographic map appeared above it, displaying a blinking red dot, a location nearby. A way out. Elias didn't hesitate. He followed the map, making sharp turns through the narrow paths of the canyon. His legs ached, but he forced himself forward. Then, he saw it, a buried structure in the canyon wall. It was ancient, covered in dust and sand, but he recognized the shape, human architecture. This was not an Akri base. It was something older. Elias approached carefully, his breathing ragged. A large metal door was half buried in the rock, its surface marked with faded human letters. Project RCI takes D. Access restricted. His pulse quickened. This place was connected to him, to his past. A deep hum filled the air. The device in his hand vibrated. The door suddenly unlocked. Elias stepped forward, pushing the heavy metal aside. Inside, dim blue lights flickered to life, revealing the hidden chamber. Rows of old computer terminals, control panels, and storage containers lined the walls. The air was stale, untouched for decades, maybe longer. His fingers brushed over a nearby console, wiping away dust. A screen lit up with data logs. Log entry 42. Project Architect Overview. Lead Engineer, Dr. Elias Farron. Elias staggered back. His name. But he wasn't a scientist. He wasn't an engineer. Was he? His breath came in short gasps as he scrolled through the files. More pieces of a past he couldn't remember. The architect is the key to the next evolution of human intelligence. A mind built to integrate with advanced alien technology, a bridge between species. His vision blurred. The Akri weren't after him because he was a threat. They were after him because he was a weapon. Suddenly, the device in his hand beeped. Interiors DKETTE. Elias turned just as Zakara stepped into the chamber. The betrayal. Zakara's expression was unreadable as she walked forward. Her dark armor glowed under the flickering blue light, her eyes scanning the chamber. "I should have known," she muttered. "You really are him." Elias's hands curled into fists. "I don't even know who I am." Zakara tilted her head. "Maybe that's for the best." She stepped closer. Elias tensed. "If you're here to take me back to Xyroth, you're wasting your time." Zakara let out a small laugh. "Oh, Elias." Then she tossed her weapon to the ground. Elias froze. "I'm not taking you back," Zakara said. "I'm getting you out of here." Shock hit him like a punch to the gut. "What?" Zakara's eyes darkened. "Xyroth doesn't want you for who you are. He wants you for what you can do. Once he has what he needs, you're dead." Elias didn't know whether to believe her. Zakara had lied before. She had led him into this trap. And yet, she had let him escape. He looked at her weapon on the ground, then back at her face. Why the change of heart? Zakara exhaled slowly. "Because I know what happens when Xyroth gets what he wants. And I know." She hesitated. "I know that the architect is the only one who can stop him." Elias's head spun. He didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel like some special project. He was just a man trying to survive. But now, he had a choice. Run. Or fight. Zakara's voice was quiet, but firm. "What's it going to be, Elias?" Outside, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the canyon. The Akri had found them. Elias took a deep breath and made his choice. Elias's heart pounded as he stared at Zakara. The hum of the underground chamber surrounded them, the dim blue light flickering against the dust-covered walls. Outside, the sound of Akri soldiers grew louder. They were coming. Elias had seconds to decide. Run. Fight. Trust Zakara. Zakara's sharp eyes locked onto his. "We don't have time, Elias. If you want to live, you follow me. Now." Elias clenched his jaw. He didn't trust her, not fully. But right now, she was the only person not trying to kill him. He nodded. "Lead the way." Zakara wasted no time. She rushed to the far side of the chamber, placing her palm on a control panel. A hidden door slid open, revealing a dark tunnel. "This leads to the lower levels," she said. "If we reach the escape pods, we can get off this moon." Elias frowned. And then what? Zakara didn't answer. She just motioned for him to follow. He sighed. No choice now. They ran into the tunnel, the door sealing behind them. The chase begins. The passage was cold and narrow, the walls pulsing faintly with old energy. Elias could feel something in the air, a strange presence, a memory of something long forgotten. He glanced at Zakara. This place. You knew it was here. Zakara didn't look at him. I knew of it, but I didn't know you would wake it up. Elias's fingers curled into fists. He still didn't understand what made him so important. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a hero. But he was the architect. Some part of him had designed this place. Some part of him had once known what it was for. They turned a corner, and suddenly the walls lit up. Symbols and data flashed in the air, floating like holograms, ancient words in an unknown language. Then a deep voice echoed through the tunnel. "Welcome back, architect." Elias stumbled to a stop. Zakara spun around, grabbing his arm. "Don't stop. They're right behind us." But Elias couldn't move. The air around him shifted, like the walls were alive. The lights flickered, and a new symbol appeared in the air, one he understood. A door. The last door. The hidden core of the facility. Zakara grabbed his shoulder. "Elias, we need tow." Boom. A shockwave rocked the tunnel as an explosion ripped through the ceiling. The Akri had found them. Dust and debris rained down as armored figures dropped into the tunnel, their weapons glowing with plasma energy. Zakara shoved Elias behind her. "Stay low." She moved like lightning, her blades flashing as she deflected the first shots. She was outnumbered, but she didn't hesitate. Elias's mind screamed at him to run, to hide. But then, the door in front of him slid open. A deep, pulsing light beckoned him forward. Zakara blocked another attack, her voice sharp. "Elias, go." He took one last look at her, then turned and ran through the door. The core. Elias stepped into a massive circular chamber. Unlike the rest of the facility, this place was untouched by time. In the center stood a floating monolith, covered in pulsing golden light. Strange symbols shifted across its surface, whispering secrets Elias couldn't quite understand. But one thing was clear. This was the heart of Project Architect, and somehow it was waiting for him. The moment he stepped closer, the monolith reacted. Identity confirmed. Architect Elias Farron. The words echoed through his skull, not through the air, but inside his mind. Memories stirred, flashes of something buried deep. A room, a council of leaders, his own voice, saying, "The Akri will come. We must be ready." Elias gasped, gripping his head. It was him. Not a scavenger, not a runaway. He had built this place. He had known the Akri would try to take it. And now, the past was repeating itself. A deep rumbling filled the chamber. The monolith pulsed brighter, and a hidden panel slid open. Inside was a device, a small metallic implant, a key. Elias reached for it, his fingers trembling. And then, Zakara crashed into the room. She was bleeding, her armor scorched from battle. She looked at the device in Elias's hands, her eyes wide with shock. "No," she whispered. "You can't." Elias tightened his grip. "Why not?" Zakara stepped forward, her voice urgent. "That's not just a key, Elias. It's a command module." Elias frowned. "Command module for what?" Zakara's voice was grim. "For every hidden weapon humanity left behind." Elias's breath caught in his throat. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. Project Architect wasn't just about understanding alien technology. It was about controlling it. And now, after all these years, the system was waiting for him to decide. Command activation pending. Awaiting authorization. Elias stared at the device in his hands. If he activated it, would he save humanity? Or doom them all? Zakara's voice was barely a whisper. "Elias, what are you going to do?" The monolith pulsed. The Akri were coming. And Elias had seconds to make his choice. To be continued. This part brings the story to a major turning point. Elias finally learns part of the truth. He was involved in something much bigger than he ever imagined. The command module is the key to everything. But should he activate it? Zakera is afraid of what it will do. Why? What does she know that he doesn't? The chamber pulsed with golden light, the monolith's energy swirling around Elias like a living storm. The command module sat heavy in his hand, its surface humming with power. Zakera took a step forward, her face pale. Elias, listen to me. If you activate that device, there's no going back. Outside the chamber, the Akri forces were closing in. The sounds of their boots echoed through the tunnels, their weapons charging. They were coming to take him. But Elias had something they didn't. A choice. He looked at Zakera. Tell me the truth. What does this module really do? Zakera clenched her jaw. It's a final command signal. It will awaken the architect's hidden weapons, every lost piece of ancient human technology. It will give you power over things that were meant to stay buried. Elias tightened his grip on the module. And the Akri? What happens to them? Zakera's voice was quiet. They won't survive. Elias's heart pounded. The Akri had chased him, hunted him, tried to kill him. They had stolen from humanity, taken their worlds, destroyed everything in their path. But something inside him hesitated. This wasn't just a weapon. It was extinction. Zakera must have seen the doubt in his eyes. She stepped closer. You think you're making the right choice by using it. But ask yourself, are you becoming any different from them? Elias stared at the device, his mind racing. Then, the doors exploded. Akri warriors rushed into the chamber. The final battle. Zakera moved first. With a flash of her blade, she cut down the first Akri soldier before he could fire. Plasma bolts zipped through the air as she spun, dodging, and countering with deadly precision. Elias ducked behind a console as energy blasts struck the walls. His hands trembled around the command module. The monolith glowed brighter, responding to the chaos. Command activation pending. The Akri commander stepped forward, his black armor reflecting the golden light. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with intensity. Give us the module, human, he ordered. You don't understand its power. Elias slowly stood. Maybe I do. The Akri commander raised his weapon. Then you know that using it will doom us all. Zakera cut down another soldier and shouted, Elias, do something. The commander lunged forward. Elias didn't think, he acted. He slammed the module into the monolith. The entire chamber shook. The awakening. The deep, ancient voice echoed through the room. Command accepted. Initializing defense protocols. The monolith's light exploded outward, filling the chamber with golden energy. The Akri warriors froze, their weapons short-circuiting as an invisible force swept through them. Zakera shielded her eyes. What did you do? Elias staggered back as holograms of old Earth battles appeared in the air. Ships, cities, wars long forgotten. And then, across the barren moonscape above them, something changed. Across the stars, machines began to wake. Varied human warships, silent for centuries, lit up. Defense systems, thought to be dead, came online. A voice from the monolith whispered into Elias's mind. The architect has returned. Elias felt everything. The power, the responsibility, the sheer force of the technology now under his control. The Akri commander fell to his knees. No, this cannot be. Elias clenched his fists. Your people wanted to use me as a weapon. He stepped forward, the energy swirling around him. Now, I decide what happens next. Zakera's voice was cautious. Elias, don't become what they feared. Elias looked at her, then back at the Akri commander. He could wipe them out. He could end their threat forever. But that wasn't who he was. Not anymore. Elias took a deep breath and gave the command. Cease fire. Lock them down. The golden energy surged outward, wrapping around the Akri soldiers like invisible chains. Their weapons melted away. Their ships above were disabled. But they were alive. Zakera's eyes widened. You spared them. Elias nodded. This war ends today. No more death. The Akri commander looked at him with something that almost resembled respect. Then, without another word, the energy pulled him and his warriors out of the chamber. Elias exhaled. It was over. The future begins. Zakera sheathed her weapon. You made the right choice. Elias let out a small, tired laugh. Did I? She smirked. Well, I'm not dead, so yes. He chuckled, looking up at the monolith. The energy inside it was calm now, waiting for its next command. For the first time, Elias felt in control of his own fate. Zakera crossed her arms. So, what now? Elias looked toward the exit, where the stars stretched out in the sky beyond. A new future, one that he would build himself. He smiled. Now, we go rewrite the rules.